From the Basque region of country Spain, I had first seen Orbeas from Lance's run of Tour de France. I remember seeing guys like Iban Mayo dancing up Alpe d'Huez aboard the Orbea Orcas, or actually I don't know if they were called Orcas back then. And just as Celeste green is synonymous with Bianchi, one can argue the burnt orange color of my Orbea Orca is also synonymous with the company Orbea. So how does this stack up? Is it nice enough to line up next to some of the more familiar names? Is it worth your hard-earned dollars? Let's find out. Diabetic Cycling, aka DC, and no, not the other famous DC. Please hit the subscribe button and smash the like button and hit the bell notification, as your support is what's important to continue to put out contents like this on this channel. Through the course of this year, I'm going to bring you reviews of a couple of bikes. Typically I rotate 2 to 3 bikes, sometimes even 4. Now, as far as the credentials concerned to bring you these types of reviews, I am not an ex-pro racer. I'm not working for as a bike reviewer at some kind of a publication. I don't work at a local bike shop. Every episode that I bring you, every bike review that I bring you is from my own riding experience, from a guide that you can commonly find on your typical Saturday group shop rides. Everything that I, again, bring you is sponsored and brought to you by none other than my wallet. Every bike that I show you is everything that I personally purchase and own, and significantly put some miles down before I bring you any sort of a review based on my opinion. So the opinions and statements that I'm going to make during this review video would be based on years of my riding, bunch of different dozen or so, 2 dozen or so bikes that I've had pleasure of owning and riding in the past. And those bikes would include things like the Canyon CF SLX. I've had a bunch of different iterations of Cannondale Evos, high mods. I had a specialized Olay, a bunch of different giant TCRs, a bunch of Defies. More recently also the Rosa SK Pininfarina, and Merckx San Remo 72, also Cervelo S3, Focus Izako Max. So those would be some of the bikes that I'm drawing my thoughts and opinions from in comparison. Now that the baselines have been established, let's now talk about my Orbea Orca. So Orca is short for Orbea Carbon. Has nothing to do with Big Whale. So the first distinction we need to make is Orbea puts out Orbea Orca Aero and just regular Orca. So Aero, as the name indicates, would have aero tubing shapes. And mine is just regular Orca. And within the Aero range and the regular range, then they put out a bunch of different trim levels. with various spec components and various price points, obviously. Then as far as the frame material is concerned, obviously carbon, higher end models would use their OMX carbon, whereas the more budget-friendly, wallet-friendly version like mine would be made with OMR carbon. So the bike I show you is the OMR monocoque carbon construction with all Shimano Ultegra bits as group set, along with the Orbea's in-house wheels called Ep.9. Now, since I bought the bike, I have changed out some components, which I'll touch briefly on later as we go through this video. So as it is trendy with the current bike companies putting out bikes, there's integration, which where all the cables are completely and fully out of sight, very well, neatly tucked under the stem as they come out of the drop bar. But based on what I've seen, it's not as nasty to the mechanics to work on that compared to some of the other bikes with proprietary integration of a cable routing. Stock drop bar that comes on the bike is 42 centimeters wide, and it has this rise at the where the hand positions go, about 15 millimeter rise. And those are one of the reasons why I had to swap out my bars, because 42 to me, by the way, my frame is 51 centimeter size and 42 centimeter bar, little too wide, so I normally typically opt for 40 centimeter wide, and the 15 millimeter rise actually weren't doing any good to me because I'm finding the head tube to be just a hair touch taller than I would like, so the bar had to go. As far as the drivetrain is concerned, the front chainring is 5034 out of the factory and 1130 cassette in the back, which is just fine. Covers a pretty decent range for a guy like me. And the Orbea Ep.9 wheels, I couldn't find a whole lot of information about those wheels, but I'm gonna assume the ready means tubeless ready, and 19 possibly meaning 19 millimeter internal width. And they come with Vittoria's Zafiro tires, which I'm sure they're very strong against the things like the puncture protection and whatnot, but they felt a little sluggish. So again, as I always do with all my bikes, I swapped with, I put in my own wheels as well as Schwalbe Pro 1 tubeless ready tires that are set up tubeless, 28 millimeters wide. In-house branded OC2 carbon seat post, pretty standard affair, 27.2. And I actually didn't feel the need to change the seat post to something more fancy. As a bunch of Century rides I've done, I felt plenty fine with the seat post, providing the compliance where it's needed. And another plus, I guess, is they use just regular old seat post instead of some proprietary shaped seat post where even if you, let's say, wanted to swap out to something different, you wouldn't have had that choice. Saddle that is a stock is from Selle Roya and model is a Seta, which I don't know anything about, but it basically has very flat profile, whereas if you see pictures from my videos of my bike, you will see I tend to have a bit of, I use a saddle that is a bit of a high tail on the backside, bit of a concave, and then coming up through the nose, bit of a curvature. I prefer that, so I also changed out the saddle, but the saddle, the stock saddle felt firm. It just, I couldn't get along with the flat, very flat profile of the top surface. Before we start talking about how she rides, let's talk about how she looks. So it might sound a little bit asinine, but I'm a firm believer that a good-looking bike is a bike that gets ridden more often. And this very orange Orca does not disappoint in that department. The lines are very clean and streamlined with that modern day bike aesthetics. So the top tube has a flat top with the like a half the round shape on the bottom side. Down tube is absolutely beefy and chunky, and bottom bracket area is also absolutely ginormous. Just by looking at it, you could probably tell that it's very stiff and not going to rob you from any sort of wattage as you're pedaling. The stays are very clean and lacking any sort of gimmickry going on, keeping the bike's aesthetic extremely clean and streamlined. And again, no issues there at all, really helping the overall look. The left chainstay is a slightly thicker, which I assume is designed that way to compensate for the increased torque coming from the disc rotor being on the left side. So it's a little bit chunkier on the left side, but I mean, you would have to look hard to see that it is a little bit chunkier. However, consequently, the fork blade up at the front and the left side fork blade isn't any thicker than the right side. So the OMR carbon tubes that they use are not aero, so you're not going to see any kind of aero tubing profile, no chemtail, truncated foil that is very common in bike industry for making things aero. In terms of weight, she was 20 pounds flat out of the box. Now with the componentry change, because I wanted to use some of the parts that I prefer using, but also helped in weight reduction. So she now weighs 17.5 pounds. So based on the bikes that I have ridden in the past, I tend to prefer aggressive geometry with a somewhat stiff frame. Obviously, who would want noodly frame? I don't mind feeling all the bumps and everything as I'm riding. So, you know, that kind of feedback, I don't really mind. So usually comfort is, I'm gonna try to find comfort elsewhere than the frame's geometry. Now that said, two bikes that's in my, well, I guess 3 bikes, including the one attached to the trainer at all times. So 2 bikes that I currently ride in the rotation, both the BMC Road Machine and the Orbea Orca, they're more endurance, relaxed geometry than out and out complete racing machine that's gonna have a little bit more of an aggressive geometry that I would normally prefer. So this Orbea, like I said earlier, has a bit of a slightly taller head tube than what I would like for a 51 centimeter frame. And rest of the geometry falls actually somewhat in the middle of a out and out aggressive race frame geometry and complete endurance focused bike. So it sort of sits in the middle, and I'm actually beginning to like this middle ground a bit. Now she spins up fast out of the gun from that stop, and it really holds the speed well once you get it up to a certain speed. But I also attribute some of that to the wheels, not just the frame and everything else. The bike overall feels very springy, and you really get the feedback from the bike that really wants to jump forward. And for bikes, that's really a great feedback that you would pick up from a bike. So that all, again, ticks all the boxes for me. Front end is really solid and confidence boosting compared to my BMC Road Machine, which I felt the front end is a slightly jittery. So it's, again, when you are knee down just taking on that corner, it's, again, very confidence boosting because I don't have to squeeze on the brake lever as early and maintain somewhat of a slower speed to maintain consistency as I'm making on that corner. Although it's not aero by nature, by design, I don't feel the bike is sluggish at all. My power numbers and speed numbers, when I look at some of the ride records, indicate I'm actually faster on this bike than some of the other bikes that I've had in the past before, aero or not. So that's, that says a lot. Every bike reviewer really likes to throw around the word compliance, so I guess I'm gonna do the same here. And I've gone on a bunch of Century rides with the bike, and just a matter of fact, just did a solo Century just last weekend, and I didn't feel the bike was beating me up at all. I was able to come off the bike after my Century ride, which I took 0 break in between, no cafe stop, nothing like that. I was able to come off the bike and didn't feel beaten up at all. Very comfortable, both the front end and the back end. Everything just working well in harmony in terms of compliance is concerned. Front end is grounded and very calm, but also probably aided by the carbon zip aero bar that I have instead of the stock aluminum bar. And rear triangle stays do a great job just absorbing everything. Now I'm running 28 mil tires, but you can, this frame, the way it's designed, you can fit 30, possibly 32, I don't know. That would also depend on the size of your rims as well. But basically be able to run wider tires with the slightly less air to give you a bit more plush ride. Again, like I said before, the bike doesn't have any sort of gimmicks up at the front end or the back end. There's no inserts, no rubber, elastic material, none of that. But the bike, again, does what it needs to do without all the other things to provide you a very comfortable ride, which if you're fast and comfortable, what else do you want? Now, in terms of climbing, let's not kid ourselves. This bike is not built as a light climbing machine. And as I said before, she currently weighs 17.5 pounds. So, you know, compared to like 14-pound Canyon CF that I used to ride and Canon Evo High Mod that I used to ride, there's a couple extra pounds here for sure. However, I try not to be slave to the numbers, just the sheer numbers. And when I'm climbing, I mean, again, it comes with the whole comfort and everything else, and the power ability to transfer all that power generated directly to the rear wheel. I don't feel that I'm sluggish on climbs, so the bike does a great job actually aiding you climb up anything steep. So again, ticks that box for me as well. In the end, it's your legs, not the bike, that's gonna help you get up there. So long as you have greatly trained legs and whatever frame you're using is above a certain level, then you'll do fine. Slight weight difference in different bikes, it's gonna be marginal. Again, some will chase and spend thousands and thousands of dollars to chase that marginal gain, but at some point, you and me, perhaps being normal Joes out on hobby rides and out on group rides, maybe it's just good enough. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with the stock build, but I did swap out the wheels, so I'll touch on that briefly. So the stock wheels were dumped and I put in my Hunt Aerodynamicist 44 at the front and 55 in the back, set up with tubeless tires, a 28 mil wide again. So that certainly helps not only with the weight, but bike really came to life after the wheel change, where it's just a lot more pleasant to ride. Now that said, manufacturers will spec, you know, more economical components, especially the wheels. And those wheels are basically just so you have wheels to ride out of the dealer parking lot with, not to be used as your race day tires. For training tires, I guess that would be great because they're heavy and you would need to really work to get them spun. So the wheel change, if you're serious about riding, a must. So let's talk about pros. What a ride! Just a springy feedback while maintaining all-day ride comfort. Hard to fault. In the sea of black bikes in your local group rides, this orange certainly pops. What a stunner. Now, if the orange is not your thing, they do have a different patterns and colors, and you could also customize your Orcas through their MYO program. Although I understand the wait time is like 8 months. So if instant gratification is your type of thing, then perhaps that wouldn't work, but you do have choice, a lot of choices in how you want to customize the look of Orbea Orca. Perhaps minor, but brilliant C-post clamp design is something I want to mention here, because you will find a lot of frames come with some sort of a proprietary design feature where it's neatly like hidden or tucked underneath, where it's really hard to get your wrench in there to crank it. And this one Very easy to adjust, secure, and doesn't obstruct the overall aesthetics of the bike. Another box that ticks for me. Probably no surprise to a lot of you, the Ultegra bits that's on this bike, absolutely stunning, performs absolutely perfectly. That's despite the fact that I prefer SRAM shifters because of my hands and the way the SRAMs shift. That's what I prefer, and yet the Ultegra performance here is nothing to scoff at. Let's talk about cons. Surely not everything can be so rosy on a bike. So one of the first things that I want to mention in the cons is it doesn't look like you can use a third-party stem if you don't like this stem, or if you want to change the rise angle. So typically, because the head tube is a slightly taller than I would have liked, I would prefer using something that's 0-degree stem that is parallel to the ground. But because of the way this is designed, there's this one integration piece directly under the stem where all the cables congregate and go into the headset area. So doesn't look like there's an option for a different stem, and looking at Orbea's website, it doesn't appear they have a 0-degree stem that they offer. So I'm sort of stuck with the stem, which I guess it's not the end of the world. The light condition keeps changing, so I have to keep changing my camera's settings. So if it looks darker than brighter, darker, brighter, that's because of the clouds going by and weather becoming slightly overcast. And yeah, second con, the stock bar that comes with the bike has this 15mm rise as mentioned earlier, and that's a hit and miss depending on who you are. Maybe you like it, maybe you won't. And me, I just want straight up flat, no rise, none of that junk. So drop bar having this artificial rise is something I don't much care for. Third con and final con is it actually doesn't come stock with the bike. You actually order it separately through Orbea. So Orbea has out front Garmin mount, $29 or $25, and it ships out of Spain. So you pay $25 to $30 in shipping. So at the end of the day, this freaking mount end up costing you $50, $55. Now, this thing goes directly on the stem cap, and it's held down together by two small screws from the inside of the stem cap, and the mount is, obviously on the outside of the stem cap. This freaking thing is not solid at all. So I have my Karoo 2 from Hammerhead GPS out front computer. So on there, I'm riding. The freaking bolts come loose every time. So the mount is, doing this junk. It doesn't stay solid. I tried time and time again to secure it. I even thought about crazy gluing the bolts from the inside so maybe they wouldn't move. Forget it. I took the mount off, and now I'm just running some other standard mount. So that's another con. If you get an Orbea, Orca or not, if you are thinking about this out front mount, I cannot recommend one. So let's conclude this bike review video. We've all seen the bike industry go through major changes in year 2020, which is now spilling over to 2021. We are now finding bikes that are so overpriced. High-end top-tier bike now costs more than a Ducati. When a bike costs more than 150 horsepower Ducati from Italy, there's something wrong here. I digress. So with that said, it's not hard to find bikes now with 105 group set costing more than $3,000. Just rewind 2 years ago, if you told me your 105 group set bike, carbon bike, wasn't going to cost you more than $3,000, we would have all scoffed at it, but that is no longer the case. Case in point, my BMC Road Machine, again, all 105, and MSRP, the dealer price is $3,200. This Orca that I have was $2,900 brand new when I bought the bike earlier this year. Of course, I noticed the Orbea, in preparation of this video, I checked it out again, and Orbea has raised the price, so it's now actually $3,100. But if you look at just my bike, brand new price, so BMC Road Machine with the 105 was $3,200, and Orbea Orca with Ultegra is $2,900. Both of them come with the shit wheels, so basically apple to an apple here. So you get more bang for the buck with the Orbea Orca here, and they actually both weigh the 20 pounds out of the box at the same weight, coincidentally. So, and of course, that's if you can find any bike in inventory stock at any of your shops. I mean, online or not, or local shops, it's very hard to find bikes right now. So all that considered and all that said, this Orbea Orca is an absolute gem. So with the price tags considered, with the componentry considered, if I was pitted to pick from my BMC Road Machine versus Orbea Orca, I think I'm gonna lean towards the Orca a bit more because of its aesthetics. Both are handsome looking bikes. I think I just gravitate a little bit more towards the slightly more streamlined the look of the Orca. Also, the way it rides, and not to say the BMC Road Machine doesn't ride well, but it has this very stringy, very springy feel. So one way I would describe it is the BMC Road Machine feels like Aston Martin Rapid, four-door sedan, and still fast, but it has that longer wheelbase and gives you a slightly different ride than the Orca, which I would compare to like Aston Martin Vantage, the two-door coupe, and on the lower spectrum on the Aston Martin range. I'm not sure where I'm going with this analogy, but that's sort of how I feel about the Orca. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of owning and riding dozens of great bikes, but I would be hard-pressed not to put this Orbea Orca in my top 5 all-time favorites. Dare I say, possibly even top 3 when you consider everything involved. The componentry, the weight, the color, the looks, the way it rides and everything. So to me, this is an absolute winner. I love this bike. I'm not sure if this is a bike that I'm gonna sell to move up to something different later on down the road in my constant rotation. I do rotate my bikes every couple to 3 years. And this is a great bike. I love it. And the price was not horrible given the current climate as well as the componentry. By investing a little bit of money into some of the components upgrade, the bike is an absolute beast, real pleasure to ride. All right, so that wraps up this episode of the bike review. I hope to come back and see you again. So if you like this content and if you stay this long, please consider subscribing, hit that like button and the bell notification so I can come see you more often later. Thank you and be good humans. Until next time, I'm out.